YouTube says it has had enough of vaccine misinformation on its site.
And false stories from phony sites to run circles around major news outlets.
Many people don't know the difference between something real and something created to deceive them.
Open your eyes.
If you've ever had this feeling that something was terribly wrong with the world that we live in, but you couldn't figure out just what it was, then you've come to the right place. Secret societies, mystery religions, and the Illuminati have been controlling our reality since the beginning of time. But not anymore, because there is an awakening happening, and you are about to become a part of it. Wake up, because this is a call for an uprising.
So yes, even in the face of terrible wildfires and divisive politics, and for years to come through trauma and joy, this seemingly absurd ritual is going to be here. This seemingly absurd ritual.
This is a call for an uprising. Welcome to today's show. That's right, this ridiculous ritual that occurs every year occurred once again, but it's nice to finally hear them admit themselves that this is indeed a massive ritual. And of course, a massive ritual, even by definition, is a ceremony according to a prescribed order. And make no mistake about it, they let us know who that order indeed is, who runs and controls Hollywood, who runs and controls the mainstream media and pretty much all media, and of course runs and controls our government. Now, you may have noticed if you tuned in at all to the Oscars that in addition to the many pyramids that you'll always see, the stage was actually set up behind Conan O'Brien, the main stage, as a Masonic compass. You can even invert it and flip it upside down and see for yourself. That is a compass, and when he speaks of a ritual, that's exactly what you're seeing take place, because the Freemasons run and control Hollywood. Now, of course, this goes way beyond Freemasonry, but the tie-ins in Freemasonry and a lot of the cult religions in Hollywood, like the Kabbalah, are all joined at the hip. They teach the same exact thing, which is that Lucifer is the god of this world. That is the god that they worship, and they believe themselves to actually be gods among us, like the Egyptian gods and goddesses. And of course, that's exactly why that statue that you see called Oscar is actually the statue of Ptah. Now, I've covered Ptah over the years, and as I like to call Ptah, because, makes me want to spit when I see these Egyptian deities. But Ptah was the Egyptian god of creation, arts, crafts, and trade. He was the patron of craftsmen. And if you look deeper into Ptah, he's the creator and god and maker of things. So he is the patron of craftsmen. And what a coincidence that as you see that Freemasonic compass, as I discuss these secret societies who control and run Hollywood and our politics, that Ptah is associated with the word craft and craftsman, because guess who also uses terminology like craft and craftsman? The Freemasons do. In fact, they call it the craft. And then you might be suddenly realizing that you've heard that word craft before. Of course, craft associated with not just Freemasonry, not with Ptah, but witchcraft, because it's all one in the same. These are sorcerers, witches, Satanists operating right in front of our eyes and using things like motion pictures and television shows to spellcast on us, because the creation of the television, the creation of these movies was not to entertain you and make money. It is a form of mind control. It's a form of hypnotism. And that's what these people are. They are massive deceivers who pretend that what they're doing is creative and artistic. It is not. It is spell casting. So we have Conan O'Brien mentioning that the Oscars are a massive ritual. Of course, at the same time, he's mentioning that this ritual will continue year after year. He mentioned things like trauma, which is interesting because we all know about trauma-based mind control, which is really what we're all under in a sense if we pay attention to these movies and these news stories and actually, especially the news, believe that these stories are actually naturally occurring because they're not. They use the news as a form of trauma-based mind control, blurring our lines between reality and fiction, making us think that when we turn on the news, this is what's going on in the world, but they're actually creating the news. They're manufacturing it so they can manufacture us and manufacture our behavior. The other thing, of course, he mentioned were those wildfires. So how convenient, because that was a ritual done as well out on the civilians in Los Angeles. Of course, not the civilians who were attending this award show because they all knew ahead of time. And if their property was in the line of fire, well, they were bought out and paid handsomely for their land, unlike anybody else who may have been there and was not notified ahead of time. But the celebrities obviously knew exactly what was coming because this is what they're taught and trained in secret societies. They do what they're told. They do whatever is asked of them. And if they refuse, then you never hear from them again. That's what the oaths are that they take. They take secret oaths. I always refer to Mozart. Mozart was a Freemason. Mozart started speaking out against Freemasonry, revealing some of the secrets. Did you ever hear what happened to Mozart? He was Mozarted. Mozart mysteriously died at a very young age. You may have seen pictures depicted of how nobody attended Mozart's funeral. Why do you think that was? Because all of Mozart's friends who were Freemasons, he turned on them, at least in their eyes, by divulging their secrets out publicly, by drinking a little too much and letting people know who was manipulating, controlling, and ruling the world around them. And then, of course, he had himself an accident and was never heard from again. So all these celebrities are on board with all of it, including sabotaging our government infrastructure. And even if it means burning their homes to the ground, it doesn't matter. They're just given a lot of money and they're relocated to a different area. They will always, always, always do what the Brotherhood tells them to do. And it goes for Freemasons and the Eastern Star Witches. So speaking of witches, let's transition into some of the witches that showed up at the Oscars, which again is everybody who's there is a witch and a devil worshiper. But Ariana Grande showed up, of course, to promote the film Wicked. I'm sure most of you have heard about Wicked, how they promote this to young children out there. And of course, the world we live in now, people think that it's crazy for somebody like me to point out how rampant witchcraft is in our society. And this obviously goes back to Disney, right? If you actually sit and think, every single Disney movie revolves around magic, from magic slippers to Beauty and the Beast and the magic rose, the magic potions. It's all about magic, the Magic Kingdom, right? This is an indoctrination of magic that we see around us. And of course, they wanted to promote the film Wicked, despite the fact, if you don't remember, when they were selling that Wicked doll, that they decided to leave a website up on that doll for children to go to that website. And of course, the website was a pornographic website, but they dropped that story pretty quickly because they didn't want anybody out there to look poorly at what Wicked really is about. They wanted to keep promoting it so parents would continue bringing their kids to see these films that indoctrinate their kids with witchcraft. And they just moved on and quietly continued to promote it. So Wicked was on display, as well as you could see here, right? Numerous things. You see that on the floor. This is something common at all the award shows, from the Grammys to the Oscars. It is a magic circle. It's a ritual circle, right? They believe that they're protected inside of these circles when they spell cast. That's why if you ever see a movie like The Craft, or a movie that revolves around witchcraft, or if you ever see pictures of ancient witches, right, they're always holding hands in a circle. Often we'll have a circle drawn out on the floor with maybe a pentagram inside of it. This is part of magic and spell casting. So the stage is part of the ritual. So they're always performing inside of these circles. You could look at any award show. There's always just going to be this random circle on stage. And of course, most people just refuse to see it. They'd rather live and be naive their entire lives and think that they just want to put a circle on the stage and has nothing to do with witchcraft or the occult, because they don't want you to believe it actually exists. And you also notice one of the things that they do very commonly in the background, when they put all these lines through the screen. I covered this recently with Katy Perry at the MTV Music Awards. You can see the heptagram right in the background, right? You can see the heptagram multiple times. And of course, this is referencing Aleister Crowley and the mother of abominations, the seal of Babylon, used in these rituals that are performed. I even covered this recently with Apple Intelligence, right? Summoning the demon, artificial intelligence, which most people out there don't understand what it even is. They think it's just like upgraded Google search, when you have all of these quantum computing experts out there, even Elon Musk, telling you, no, what we're doing with AI is summoning a demon, right? That's exactly what they're doing. Energy, right? Think of what they've told you about energy and how much energy is going to be needed for AI to run and continue to run, and for our government to use AI, which they're bringing in, AI governance, right? Well, energy harvesting is what witches do. They harvest energy. That's witchcraft 101. So when they tell you that they're going to need excess amounts of electricity and energy for AI to run, that's because they're telling you right to your face when Elon Musk says that they're summoning the demon, because this is spiritual. This is spiritual what's happening around us. So if you think that I'm stretching with the heptagram, because I know sometimes when I do these videos, some people will see all the lines, like, I don't see the heptagram in there. I don't see a pentagram in there. I just kind of sees what he wants to see. Well, let's just do the blatantly obvious ones, right? Here they are, blatantly just showing you all-seeing eye symbolism for about 5 minutes straight, right? We have somebody descending, or are they levitating in front of the screen? And of course, what's on the screen? Well, the all-seeing eye is right on the screen. And then as they continue with their ritual, they just leave the Oculus right on the screen. Now, I don't know if all these people at the Academy Awards all just love eyeballs. They have a fascination with eyeballs. It's their favorite thing about a man or a woman, is they love their eyes. They always just love showing us our eyes. As I often say, maybe they all flopped out of optometry school, but if you're not paying attention, there's an obsession in Hollywood, in our world, with eyeballs. These celebrities get eyeballs tattooed on their bodies. Nobody seems to pay attention to it, right? The all-seeing eye of Horus. But I mean, it's right on the back of the dollar bill. So is everybody there? Is it just about money? Is that what we're being told, right? Is that what they're trying to tell us? Is that the excuse that people will make when we constantly see all-seeing eye symbolism? I mean, it's right on the back of the dollar bill, right? Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages. And that, in fact, means a new world order, which is what you're seeing built out around us by these same people who are responsible for dividing us day in and day out, while they continue to seize power and point you in the wrong direction at looking at why everything is wrong in the world. Everybody should be looking at these Freemason lodges, at these Eastern Star lodges, where the women assemble and have the upside down pentagram as their actual logo. You might notice these symbols if you pay attention driving down a highway, because they want you to know that there's a Freemason lodge and an Eastern Star lodge in a specific town, because they go when they drive around, when they network, or they're going places for work, and they network with one another. It is an actual conspiracy. It's a secret society conspiring against the rest of the world. And nobody pays attention to it, because these are the same people who control the media, who control the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Got to control both sides to be able to divide everybody. And they constantly have you looking at your fellow neighbor, at the guy up the road who has the Ukraine flag in their lawn, instead of looking at the real people responsible, who are all in this room at the Academy Awards. And of course, it goes further and deeper than that. We can look at the Vatican. We can look at all these other places. But these are your social engineers who are all meeting together. So in addition, of course, to that, we have our same black and white symbolism. Some of these performers always wearing the black and white colors. Of course, that's duality, the esoteric garbage that they believe in, as above, so below. Of course, every Freemason lodge has black and white tile floors. You'll often see celebrities like the Kardashians. Their home is lined and littered in black and white tiles, whether it's wallpaper or their tiles and they're throughout their home. Okay, this isn't just some look where they, hey, I wanted to get black and white tiles because I wanted it to look like the 1960s in my home. This is everything to do with the occult, and that's what they're a part of. So all these people who are in this room are government operatives, social engineering. You might not realize that it actually exists, but it's a tactic of manipulation. They put these people in these positions of power to influence your behavior. That's how we can look at how people's perceptions of things have changed so much over time. That's how we can look at how things like men bobitizing themselves and becoming women is now normal. because celebrities promote it. Celebrities consistently tell you to be a good person, to do this, and they manipulate your behavior. They're the same ones, right, who get everybody politically involved, tell you to go vote because they want you sucked into the psychosis of thinking that it's all about your vote and who you vote for, when your vote doesn't actually count. It's a part of their game to keep you controlled, to keep you engineered and manipulated by them. So when I talk about social engineering, look no further than the films that get nominated for Oscars. Because we're not talking about films where maybe you could look back and say, oh, that was a pretty good movie, like let's say The Godfather or something like that. These are all films that nobody would ever sit and watch, that nobody wants to watch. But there's all agendas behind all the films, right? So let's look at a few of the ones that were nominated, because this is how social engineering works, right? Amelia Perez is one of the films nominated. What's the plot? Well, the plot is about a transgender drug lord who undergoes gender reassignment surgery and becomes an activist. Now, in a normal world, in any world really, this would not be an Oscar-nominated film unless, of course, they wanted to promote it and tell you that this is a wonderful story, and people hear about the movies that are nominated and they decide to go and see some of these films. Otherwise, this film would be sitting at a 7-Eleven inside of the $1 DVD bin, because it's a horrible concept, it's a horrible film, and nobody would ever watch it in a million years. If somebody told you this plot 10 years ago, you would have laughed and said, this is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. Why don't you just add Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger to the script? Because the concept itself is absolutely ridiculous. But of course, they want to tell you that it's a wonderful story. They want you to go and see it. They want you to accept it because they're socially engineering you, right? Let's take a look at another one of the films nominated. It was Conclave, right? Here we go, right? We continually always get our Catholic Church Jesuit theme when they do these movies, right? The theme will be about the corrupt church, what these men are doing behind closed doors with children, right? Well, here, this one specifically is about Cardinal Benitez, who reveals that he is intersex during a secret conclave to elect a new pope. This revelation is the film's major twist. And for anyone's wondering, because I even had to look it up myself, intersex, I mean, there's so many pansex, I mean, all these words that they throw at us, it's hard to keep up with the nonsense, really. But intersex refers to a natural variation in human sexual development where a person's physical characteristics, such as genitalia, chromosomes, or hormone levels, do not fit neatly into the traditional male or female category. So in other words, just nonsense, right? And of course, this is nominated, and of course, they want to tie in the church with all of it, and they want to mock Christians with all of it, right? And then last but not least, on the films that I'm covering, just so you can see how social engineering works, of course, The Substance is nominated. Now, how often do horror films, because The Substance is pretty much on the fringe of being like a horror thriller type film, how often do those types of films ever in the past get nominated for Oscars? Like any horror movie that you've heard of has never even been discussed for an Oscar. Let's say Halloween, or I mentioned Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street, right? Then you look at those and say, oh, those are classic horror movies. Well, they've never been in the discussion. Nobody was like, the year Halloween came out, let's nominate it for an Academy Award. They would have laughed you off for even thinking of that. But of course, this is nominated because the plot of the film, what's the plot, ladies and gentlemen? I gotta be careful, because when I covered this another time, or at least another YouTuber sounded a lot like me, got the entire channel wiped out. So let's just put it this way. The plot is a fading celebrity takes a mysterious drug that creates a younger version of herself. The drug is called The Substance. It is a black market cell replicating fluid, right? Now, ironic that when you look at Demi Moore, I mean, I'm not saying that Demi Moore is attractive, but Demi Moore at 62 looks pretty similar to 22. A lot of these witches don't age, of course, it's because there is a substance, a red one, that they all love. And really, if you look back at history of witches and the red substance, then you start to actually go, oh, okay, and this is why people were catching witches and there was witch trials and all that. It wasn't just because they smelled like sulfur and had armpit hair. It's because they were doing things that involved a red substance. And I won't go into further detail, but of course, I'm sure some of you remember some of the videos I've done on Demi Moore, which are available on the website, which I can't even show you the images of, where she's at a party with like a 12-year-old. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. But Demi Moore, of course, is a Kabbalist, like most of the celebrities, right? You always hear about them wearing that red bracelet. In fact, you could be on the left and right and wear the red bracelet, and most people don't ever notice. Tucker Carlson wears one every single day, right? To tell you what club he's in, but you're not allowed to question that club. So we'll just continue on. And Demi Moore at one point was married to Ashton Kutcher. And of course, Ashton Kutcher doesn't hide the fact that he's a Freemason either, right? Often at Laker games wearing the hat, often taking walks around Hollywood wearing his Freemasonic hat. He's not hiding it at all. And of course, if you actually know Ashton Kutcher's history, which I've covered in the past, he's also connected to a mysterious death in Hollywood, because when they talk about sacrifice, they're not talking about spending a few extra hours at night reading scripts, trying to master their craft. They're talking about ritual sacrifice. And really, that's what the Oscars are all about. I mean, they told you right from the get-go that it's a ritual. At the same time, talking about wildfires that killed people, that destroyed homes, right? Part of a ritual, because it's all part of a ritual. And these are your Freemasons. And of course, they're members of many different secret societies. Freemasonry, at its core, most people say, well, Freemasonry's at the bottom of the pyramid. They're not very important. These are arguments that people try to get in with me. But you have to understand that in order to get to a higher level, to get into different secret societies, you start at the Freemasonic level. And that means you start in your town, because every single town in America has a Freemason lodge. And if you Google it or whatever you use, DuckDuckGo it, and you don't find one in your town, then it's in one town over, because maybe you have a small town. This is how they recruit. These people get indoctrinated in the occult. They learn about Lucifer being God. They learn a lot of these ancient Egyptian teachings that are Babylonian teachings that have been passed on. And it's passed on through there. And you're supposed to think, of course, that these lodges are like fraternities. You're supposed to think that it's just a bunch of guys who never grew up, who still wanted to do keg stands and go and hang out and meet on Wednesday nights. Well, did you ever know that the windows on these lodges are fake? That they have fake windows because they don't want you to ever look inside, because you don't, or you're not supposed to, I should say, ever find out what they actually believe and what they're actually doing. Because these are the people who are conspiring against the rest of the world. And when they talk to you and they show you the all-seeing eye and they put things on the dollar bill that say things like Novus Ordo Seclorum, they're telling you a new order of the ages brought in by them and their god, Lucifer. So just a major award show. I mean, we could just recap, obviously, the way the stage is set up. This is always a common theme, right? We'll always see pyramids and those types of things. We got the Masonic compass. We've got the Ptah, which is the Oscar award. That's what it's based on, right? And of course, what do we find out about the Ptah? Well, the Ptah is the creator god and maker of things, and he's the patron of craftsmen, right? And who are the craftsmen? Who's specifically always refers to the craft? Well, the Freemasons do, right? They're craftsmen. But who else does, right? Witches do, right? Even movies like The Craft. I mean, the word witchcraft, right? Master Masons and witchcraft and the masters of their craft, right? All ties in together. So we had the heptagram, we had blatant all-seeing eye symbolism throughout the show. Of course, the black and white colors, and really just the films that get nominated. I mean, that's all you need to know is when these films get nominated, you can automatically guess what the plots are, because this is how they engineer our society into being tolerant and accepting of their nonsense, right? And eventually, of course, this is everything to do with Baphomet worship and normalizing everything that is against the Bible. Everything that God forbids, they try to normalize in our society. And eventually, this is about oneness, one gender, one religion, right? Antichrist worship. So, the Academy Awards, I know most of you didn't sit through it. I went through just clips of it so I could cover it for everybody out there. And as soon as I saw some of the things with the all-seeing eye and the stage, I mean, it's worth covering for anybody out there that doesn't realize these are rituals. And they'll even admit to you that they're rituals. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.